Hi, today's episode is in part brought to you by a patron of the show. So Justin left me a comment on the June Coffee Time thread, and if you don't know what a coffee thread is, coffee time thread, not coffee thread, it's basically a monthly Q&A session that I run with patrons, so if you are interested in that, check it out in the description down below. So Justin left me a comment, which is just beyond amazing, so I thought to myself, let me make a dedicated video for Justin because it's such a good question, it's such an applicable question, so I'm going to answer it right here on this video. So Justin commented, I was just wondering how you make time for reading or plan it out. Is reading just a part of your natural daily routine or do you schedule it into your daily activities? My issue is I wait till the evening before bedtime and then I'm too tired, so I either read for a short time or not at all. I was just wondering if you had any ideas for someone working Monday through Friday in a 9 to 5 type lifestyle for setting a better reading routine. Any guidance would be greatly appreciated. That's a great question, and that's going to lead us straight into the problem that most people have with reading, which is that as modern people, as people inhabiting the 21st century, we are no longer readers. Reading isn't something that's just like, people reading War and Peace. People no longer have the concentration to dedicate hours on end to reading. But still, there's this lingering image at the back of our minds. It's just like, hey, maybe I could get 2 hours in tonight. Over a glass of wine, when the cats are not annoying me to death, when the kids have gone to bed, when the stove is not on fire, when my record player is working, when I have my favorite album playing in the background, when the couch is not engulfing me alive, when I don't have to think about plotting 27 revenges. See, there's this image of you just sitting down in a room, no distractions, your favorite album, you're just sitting there, you're just reading, and you're like, this is the most amazing reading experience ever, right? So that image is nice. I'm not saying it's not nice. It's nice, but it's also damaging because it places too much stress on you to create that perfect environment for you to read. It places too much expectation, right? There's too much expectation associated with this, evening reading, this very, very calm environment. There's too much baggage attached with this image. So if you really want to get to some good reading, realistically, here's the bare bones minimum steps. Here are the steps that you have to take to get yourself to read. You sit down anywhere, in any attire. You don't have to have a reading robe. You don't have to have a pipe. You just sit down and you open a book and you read. That's the basics of reading. That's how you get some reading done. That's essentially what it is. But in this very kind of confusing, especially this pandemic, everything's kind of going to shit. But especially in the 21st century, as a part of this modern, we're all modern people running around the streets. It's really difficult for us to kind of reconcile with the fact that, 2 hours stretches or really long stretches of reading time, that's simply a luxury for us right now because everything's about speed, efficiency. If you want to make money, if you want to, if you have a 9 to 5 job, that's literally what it is. So expecting yourself to read for 2 hours a day or having that really quiet space for you to read, that's a luxury. Even for me right now, I'm still studying. It's still very difficult for me to find those really long stretches of solitary time to read, right? Probably when I was 14, I could read for 4 hours a day, read YA novels and all that kind of good stuff. I could read for 4 hours a day and not feel any pressure, not feel any obligations, because I have no obligations. But now there are bills to pay, there's the shower's broken, it's fixed now. And then, have to find coins for doing my laundry and all that kind of good stuff. It's just, modern life is just a huge ball of one task after another, and it's really difficult to find those stretches of time to read. So to expect yourself to find that, that's a sort of an really unrealistic expectation. So the key to reading, a tip from Stephen King from his book on writing, he basically stated that take those long stretches of reading time if you get them, right? Take those stretches. If you do have 2 hours before you go to bed to read, well, fine, take it. If you do have your favorite Miles Davis album playing in the background, well, take it. If you do have your favorite glass of wine, take it. But alongside the luxury of reading, you also have to have this ability to read in short bursts, right? So if you want to read a lot, you have to develop kind of like both of these abilities. The ability to read in long stretches, which is a luxury, at least for me, and also this ability to read in short bursts. Right? You want to read here and there at the bus stop, in front of the theater, on a tram, on a bench somewhere in a park, when you're waiting for someone for dinner, when you're just in line waiting for a croissant or something. You want to develop that ability to read in short bursts and long stretches. So you kind of need to mediate, yourself between these two poles, because, short bursts are great, but you can't really get stuck into a book. So the kind of book that you read here is also important. So what I would do is that for short bursts, I typically bring a book with me wherever I go. And this book, it shouldn't be anything dense. It shouldn't be anything just like notoriously difficult. It shouldn't be anything that's demanding, right? So for me, that book that I carry with me on the go is The Philosophy of Andy Warhol. It's a very light read with a lot of anecdotes and funny stories in there, and there are a lot of like short pieces in there. The entire book is basically a collection of really short essays and really short kind of like personal observations. So it's a really light read for me to carry on the go. But the book that I sit down to read for hours on end, that's Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. Right? That's not that heavy, but it's kind of like the amount of effort that you need to put into reading Wilde is significantly higher than the amount of effort that you have to put into reading Andy Warhol. Because, first of all, it's a theater, it's a play, it's a theatrical experience. You have to really get stuck. You have to really put yourself in their situation, right? You have to really insert yourself into the scene. So that's the process of like immersing yourself into this theatrical experience, which I find it's not impossible, but it's just kind of difficult for me to get really immersed in one of Oscar Wilde's plays if I'm, for example, on a bus or waiting for someone at the station or waiting for my lunch, right? So it's really difficult. So you gotta kind of gauge what kind of books you could read just on a go, and what kind of books you could read when you are in one of these long 2-hour stretches. So, in summary, the reason why a lot of people aren't reading enough is not because, they don't have time. It's not because they're doing something wrong. It's just because they're putting too much, they're placing, like, there's too much expectation placed upon this like very solitary and very sort of like long-winded reading periods. There's too much baggage. There's too much baggage associated with that line of reading, so people find it really difficult to kind of spare that time. And people get really, the resistance, if you want to do something really big, there's always that resistance associated with that thing. So people get really anxious before they jump into one of these 2 hours, 2-hour stretches. So as a consequence, they don't even get started. So the remedy for that is you need to also develop the ability to reading short bursts. Just reading short bursts when you're on a bus, on a tram, probably not when you're riding a bicycle, because, I'm not liable for any injuries caused by that line of work. So read in short bursts and reading long stretches. And if you have the two abilities working hand in hand, that's how that's one of the ways that you can read a lot more. So that's my answer to Justin's question. How do you read more? Here's how.